Welcome to another episode of Legitimate Matters. I am your host, William Parris. Let me ask you a question. Are you someone that has worked in a particular career or a particular company, and you've been with that company for 10, 20, 30 years, and suddenly you realize or ask yourself, am I even happy? But now you've invested X number of years in a particular career or a job, and you realize that you're not happy and you want to change, but you don't know how. And you're afraid to start all over again because how will you pay your bills? Well, my guest today, Trica Baptiste, is the founder and president of Morgensheer Hospitality, and she has a book called Operation Reset. Trica, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
I'm very excited about this topic because I find myself in the pages of your book.
Good.
So this has been really exciting for me to have you here. So for the viewers, tell us about your path and your journey from hospitality to where you are today.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, I am a former hospitality executive in PR, travel public relations, as a matter of fact. Almost 30 years,
30 years.
Several decades in-house, what we call in-house, as PR director for hotels such as Le Parc Meridian right here in Midtown.
Here in New York, yeah.
Doral Hotels and Resorts, back when they were Doral, and Sendent Corporation, which is now Wyndham.
Right, these are big brands.
They were very, very big brands. And at the time, as I said, I was in-house PR director, the first African-American PR director of a major brand, hotel brand in each case. Did that for about 15 years and then decided to create my own company, a boutique PR firm, travel PR firm. And we were international. We had offices in Paris, London. Hotel brands we represented included Rocco Forte Hotels, Dubai Tourism. We represented Scotland, business tourism unit for 5 years, and award-winning and a really good run.
Well, congratulations, because I come from the hospitality industry myself, and I know that you certainly did not see, certainly when I started, African Americans in key positions. And the idea that you were the first African American in such an important role in the company, and then to move on and open up your own, which later became an award-winning public relations company, and then to work with major brands in tourism, for you, that is just an absolute accomplishment, Trica. Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.
And then you went on, and there's more to the story.
There's more to the story. Well, I transitioned. 2008 happened, and as we all remember, 2008 was catastrophic.
The bottom fell out.
For every sector. The bottom fell out.
Yes.
And when business did return, it returned very differently than what we'd known. And so right around that time, I realized it was time for me to move, to leave the table, per se. It was time to move forward. At that point, I spent almost 30 years in hospitality. So where do you go from there? I didn't want to start at the bottom in a completely different sector. And so I thought, how can I leverage almost 30 years of experience into something new? So I moved into real estate, commercial real estate, specializing in hospitality because, again, that's what I knew. And the transition just seemed natural to me. And so I created Morgensheer Hospitality which is actually a consortium of hospitality and real estate advisors.
Wow.
We transact, basically, primarily, on a real estate level, meaning sell and purchase hotel assets. We also provide services to investors to help them realize their investment strategies.
Wow.
And pretty much our projects are domestic and international.
Well, I mean, this is really mind-blowing. This is big. And I say that because if a person is in business and you have, a job, a good job, and you decide to step out on your own, which requires a lot of courage in and of itself.
Sure.
But then for you to be able to take and all of this experience and your contacts, and to be able to launch another business on the magnitude of what you're doing is really incredible. But here's the question. You talk in your book about knowing when to leave the table, and that stuck in my head. How did you know when to leave the table?
Well, let me just give you a little bit of history on that saying. That was something my grandmother used to say to us all the time. I come from the South and Southern Baptist, and there were certain sayings that, your grandparents would say.
Right.
And by that, she pretty much meant knowing when to move on.
When to move on.
And so a lot of her sayings I have held on to throughout my business career. I knew it was time to leave the table when the economy changed. 2008 was a big warning.
Right.
I knew intuitively that when business did return, it would return very differently, especially in the PR sector. So knowing when to leave the table for our audience out there, pay attention to the red flags, the sector, the economy, and more importantly, your passion. When your passion for anything leaves you, it's time to move on.
Right.
If there's no joy and you don't get up every morning wanting to do what it is that you do, it's time to leave the table.
Then it's time to leave the table.
But you leave the table before the chair is removed, and that's another part of it. You don't want to wait too long.
I have conversations with people often, and they say to me that they want to make a change. They're not happy in the job, but they don't know what to do. Maybe for someone watching the show, one of our viewers, maybe it's time for you to leave the table. All right? But you want to do it and you want to be prepared.
Yes.
And if you want to be prepared, then you want to come back after this break and find out how to make that happen. William Parris, Legitimate Matters. We're going to break. I think you want to come back.
I don't think we really know the full answer to that question right now, and that's hard because it's personal to me. But what we do know is that younger women who are African American tend to be diagnosed with early breast cancer more often than their counterparts. And so for that reason, we'd like for young African American women to, one, be aware of what your breasts normally look and feel like, and follow up with your doctor if you notice something not quite right. Then the second thing, go ahead and have those conversations with your family members to learn more about what your cancer history is and what your family's cancer history is.
I'm Dr. Richard Smith. I'm an oceanographer and the owner and founder of Global Aquatic Research, LLC, an aquatic sciences consulting company. I'm going to be on the set of Legitimate Matters talking about the ocean and the number of environmental issues it faces today. Stay tuned, you're not going to want to miss it.
Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. Once again, I'm your host, William Parris, having a great conversation with my guest, Trica Jean-Baptiste. Trica, we are talking about making a change at a certain point in life. I can certainly identify with that, as you and I were speaking and we were identifying, because I have a hospitality background. I was in the industry for many years. Actually, I still consult in hospitality. But there was a moment for me when I realized that there was something else that was missing that I wanted. One thing led to the next, and following what you said, my passion, going into travel, because it seemed like it made a lot of sense to go into travel, and I was booking travel, but then I went from that to having a radio talk show, and here I am today with Legitimate Matters. So I want to just emphasize that when you feel something on the inside and it draws you in a particular direction, go with it.
Exactly.
Go with it. But now our viewers are saying, well, that's great, and they can relate to what we're saying, but then how does one chart the course for change?
That is, the first step is the most difficult step of all, is really taking the time to assess your entire career. And, you know, for me, that was taking a couple of days to really physically go through files, review projects, clients, strategies, campaigns that I'd worked on, and really ask the hard questions: what worked, what didn't, and why? Which projects really gave me joy or some gratification? Which areas would I like to pursue? And that's very difficult, to have those conversations with yourself and to deal with what we consider to be failures, which are really not. And that process will lead you to what you're passionate about. And again, what other people call failures, I tend to look at signs to redirect or reinvent. They're not failures. They're warning signs that something is off balance, but you can get it back on track and monetize it. So looking at that, what can you extract from some of those experiences to create a new brand, new strategies, something that is of value to your targets?
You know what, you mentioned something that you just said just now, and it's also in your book, and you're talking about building your brand. And we hear that, it's very common. People, my brand. What is that anyway? And we think, or maybe not everyone, but some people might think that the brand is for big businesses or celebrities. A celebrity is a brand.
Right.
But we're all, if you move in that direction, a brand. Can you kind of describe what you mean by that?
Sure. Well, you know, for me, we all are brands. And a brand is basically what you're putting out there, the perception.
That message?
That message. What is the message you're crafting that you are selling ultimately to your target? And to identify the attributes that creates your brand, look at your strengths. They become the components of your brand. So, for instance, for me, I looked at both careers and what my strengths were, and basically providing value to clients so that they can achieve their investment strategies or their goals and objectives. And doing that by creating revenue-generating ideas on the PR side, or revenue-generating strategies on the investment side. That's the hallmark of my brand, value. So we each have some identifiable strength that ultimately positions us as a brand, a unique brand.
I will relate that to what you mentioned in your book when you said, remember who you are. And if you remember who you are, and you monetize who you are, that experience, there's your brand. There's your brand.
Right.
And then you have certain, then there's the business plan. Okay, now you've got to go to the planning stages. And you mentioned that in your book, the planning, and something really, really important. You said remaining relevant is the greatest gift you can give yourself.
It's the greatest. It's recession proof, and it is critical. And remaining relevant means different things to different people depending upon the sector. You can't ever get too comfortable. And I like to say that it should be common practice or practice to reinvent yourself every couple years. For me, that's how to stay relevant.
Right.
So if there is something within your body of work or skills and services that you're providing that you can tweak often, you will always remain relevant. And it goes beyond technology.
Well, one thing that you also mentioned, you can tell I read the book, right?
Yes, you did.
You also mentioned read, and you recommended certain books or magazines. You're a person
and news
and those were there's a lot of takeaways in your book, by the way, a lot of takeaways, and remaining relevant, and then of course going into the strategy part of this. You know, now you know who you are. Now you say these are my strengths, but then there's another part that comes after this, which is planning. Okay, let's talk about that.
Exactly, planning, and that again is very, very difficult. The approach for me every August, coming from hospitality, you know what end of summer means. That's when you're planning and you're forecasting for the coming year. So I kept that.
It's stress.
It's stress, and you're actually writing a physical plan.
Right.
And so I continued to do that way long after I left property. And what that does is, first of all, it helps to keep you on track. You have a clear vision of where you need to go in the coming year. If you really want to get detailed, the revenue you need to generate in the coming year. And you further break that down by month by month. So, in essence, at the end of the day, you come away with a daily plan, a monthly plan, that is in line with your goals.
And that would also include, for the viewers, certainly understanding your product or your service, knowing what your product or your service is, and most important, who's your customer? Because if you don't know who your customer is, then you have no direction.
Exactly.
Someone once said to me, I asked a person, they were telling me about their business, and I said, well, who's your customer? And they said, everyone. And I said, that's impossible.
It is.
Everyone is not your customer.
Exactly.
Well, I'm loving this conversation. We're going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the next steps in what you called in your book, Ready, Set, Launch. You're probably wondering, well, what is that? Well, you're going to have to come back after break. William Parris, Legitimate Matters.
I am Thomas Farrington, President and founder of the Prostate Health Education Network. I am also a 15-year prostate cancer survivor. My experience facing prostate cancer led me to found FIN in 2003. All black men are at high risk for prostate cancer. We're diagnosed with the disease 60% higher rate than all other men. What I tell men is that it is very important to know your prostate health. Knowledge is the best defense against prostate cancer, and you begin that by knowing the health of your prostate. So we recommend that men begin early detection testing to know their prostate health, beginning at age 40, using the PSA test and the digital rectal exam, because early detection is so crucial to beating this disease should you be diagnosed with it.
Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. Once again, your host, William Parris, having a great conversation with my guest, Trica Baptiste. Trica, we're having a great conversation. I am so enjoying you. I really am.
Same here.
We were talking about making changes in our life and our career, and we talked about really great things in terms of branding and knowing when to leave the table. But we should also pay attention to something that I certainly believe is important, and that is watching the company that you keep. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I have to acknowledge grandmama. So this is another grandmama saying, watch the company you keep, always be in good company.
Right.
And in terms of business, what I have done is created a network of basically folks I admire and respect, who are very accomplished. And they are my checks and balances, if you will. So I'm always in good company in that they are people I can go to for advice, for direction, clarity, and they're all at the top of their game.
Now, are these the quote unquote, as you describe them, your board of directors?
Yes.
When I read that in your book, I asked myself, there was a question that I had when she said board of directors. Did you mean that philosophically, or were you mean literally creating a board of directors? Tell me about that.
Well, yes, and to both, sort of. So in terms of the company, no. We do not have board of directors. They are my professional board of directors.
This is your circle.
This is
your inner
the circle of folks who are not just hospitality people. They come from real estate, Wall Street. Some come from architecture, design, just different walks of life.
I see.
What they all have in common, though, they are at the top of their game. They're all successful, and they're in a position to counsel and support should I need that.
You know, sometimes when we are on a particular journey and we feel ourselves picking up momentum, we tend to have this sense of wanting to share. You know, we want to talk about, oh, this is what I'm doing. But you have to be careful there too, because just like you surround yourself with people who will give you great advice that you can bounce things off of, there are some people who don't understand the momentum that you're on. And you can say something and share what you're excited about, and they might say something that is contrary.
Absolutely.
Okay, which is a negative. And that actually happened to me. I was sharing with someone who actually I thought was a friend for many years. And they said something that really surprised me and it hurt my feelings. I shared that with someone who I would consider to be on my board of directors. And that person said, separate yourself from that. Don't allow those individuals to speak into your psyche, those kinds of things, because that is a threat to your progress. Eliminate it. So while you're surrounding yourself with people who will encourage you, protect yourself from people that will discourage you.
But if you treat yourself as a corporation, your board of directors are not your friends. And that's the difference. So
good point.
I professionally, I view myself as a corporation.
I see.
And so the folks in my inner circle, board of directors, are not friends. We don't socialize, but we contribute to each other in some way.
That's really
through
important.
Ideas and strategies. Yeah, because otherwise they cannot be objective. You cannot be truthful with a friend for the very same reason of, hurting feelings, etc. So basically it's an exchange of ideas, of strategies, mentorship, counseling, and these folks are at the top of their game. They're not on my level. I'm not on their level. So they have absolutely nothing to lose.
Well, I see you on this level, so I don't know what that means, but I'll just go with it. But let's talk about something else, too, that while we're talking about surrounding yourself with the right people, another part of the reality of building your own business and brand and making changes is failure. Sometimes you make mistakes, and sometimes things don't go as planned. How do you even react to that when realistically it can happen?
Well, own the fact that, first of all, start with being human. Give yourself a moment or two or a day to grieve and then get over it. And then get over it. Failure, again, I don't use that word. I look at it as a misstep. I missed the mark. Something's off. I need to redirect. I need to get back on track. I need to figure out a strategy, how to move forward. Giving up is also not an option. At
Absolutely
all.
Not. Yes.
And, again, in the book, get what you came for. Haven't gotten it yet. So, and you don't give up until you get it.
Wow.
So, I mean, just recognize the fact that you are human and it's not the end of the world, and that you can get up and move forward.
You know, in all that I have on my plate, I honestly have days when I just feel overwhelmed. And I do have moments when I feel a little discouraged.
Absolutely.
But even when I feel overwhelmed and even when I feel a little discouraged, I still get up, I still go to my computer, I still make the phone calls, I still send the emails. Through all that emotion and everything that I'm feeling, I don't stay in bed, I don't throw up my hands, I don't sit there and pout. I just push forward in spite of how I feel.
Exactly, because if you are a corporation and you're treating your brand as a corporation, first quarter earnings down, you know, what are you going to do, close up shop? No, you have to turn that around. So, you know, again, feel what it's like to be sidetracked, and then, you know, get up and move forward.
I tell people sometimes if I want to stay in bed and pull the covers over my head, I don't have time for that. I'm too busy.
Right, exactly.
Let's talk about really quickly, as we get ready to wrap up the show, what's most important is what inspired you to write the book. It's called Operation Reset.
Operation Reset, and it's basically reinventing your career in any economy. And so the book really began as a blog. And, you know, each chapter was a blog, and I would distribute it to friends because they would ask advice and opinions. And I just thought, okay, it's very easy to just send a blog to everyone. And as that continued for a year, I started to get suggestions, you know, this ought to be a book. Why don't you do a book? And I thought, okay, I'll self-publish, and I did. But as I wrote the book, I realized that I was writing the book I wish had been written 7 years ago for me, when I was trying to figure out the next move, but could not go to anybody, you know, within the industry to say I'm, you know, contemplating a move out of the industry because they're competitors. So basically, it's the book that I wish was available for me. And I took it a step further, William, in that there are templates in the book. So it's not just, you know, how I did it. Basically, I included a plan. So anyone can take that template and customize it for themselves and do the work.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, Trica, it has been a delight.
Thank you
so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
And for my viewers, I hope that there's, you know, that you've learned a lot, that I encourage you. The book is called Operation Reset, Reinventing
Your Career in Any Economy,
by Trica Baptiste. And I am William Parris, and this is Legitimate Matters. Don't forget, go to my YouTube channel, just put in Legitimate Matters, and don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate you watching. We'll see you soon. William Parris, Legitimate Matters.